So today we have Pete Jenkins. He's an international speaker, advisor and trainer in gamification, taking the #1 spot on the Gamification Gurus Power 100 in February 2016, as well as being CEO of Gamification Plus. Pete is entrepreneur in residence at the University of Brighton and is a guest lecturer on gamification at King's College London and ESCP Europe. He's chair of Gamification Europe, an annual conference for gamification practitioners, as well as being practice director at Intelestream Inc, a Chicago-based CRM product development and consulting firm. This is Pete's third appearance at a DRIVA session. We always welcome him back. And this has been the most popular of the 30 or so wide-angle events we've hosted since last February.
How's that? All right.
Perfect, I can see that.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. You can see it. I just need to switch it to the fact that I can move screens. Okay. Unfortunately, what you read out about me was a little bit out of date because obviously I've done a few sessions for you. I'm not entrepreneur in residence at the university anymore, although I still teach. I'm a lecturer part-time there at Brighton. I run Gamification Plus. We do all things gamification related from a strategic and consultancy point of view, and we do it internationally mostly. So we won an export award in February 2019 for our 2018 expertise abroad. And as a result of that, actually, I became export champion. I'm now in my second year of export champion for the Department for International Trade. There's a few of us now, and it's our mission there to convince you all that exporting is easier than you might think. And you can even export knowledge and services like I do. It doesn't have to be a product. I used to chair, and I'm now an honorary ambassador for GamFed. This is the International Gamification Confederation. So that organization is our industry body around spreading best practices in gamification, which is why I like doing talks like this one. As well as teaching gamification at Brighton, I also teach entrepreneurship and a couple of other things when asked. Gamification Europe conference has been going 4 years now and is about bringing the best examples, case studies, thought leadership, etc. to share. So along with my ideas around GamFed and sharing best practices, the conference supports that, as does our Global Gamification Awards. Both the conference and the Gamification Awards open in the next few weeks for this year. For my sins, I might not look this old, but I've been a member of Brighton and Hove Chamber of Commerce for 20 years. And I'm an ambassador for that, having previously been a vice president and some other things. So I highly recommend, if you're in Brighton or Hove, joining and engaging. And at King's College London, I teach specifically gamification for HR, and at ESCP Europe, which is a French business school, the London campus, generally gamification and marketing, or gamification and creativity. All good fun. We work with quite a wide range of customers around the world, some local, some not so. At the moment, we've got quite a lot of projects going on in the health space. I think one of the industries that's got a lot of funding at the moment is health. So we're helping on a rehab project for pulmonary, so post-COVID recovery for British Heart Foundation, and also a rehab project for arthritis. So for people who have MSK or musculoskeletal issues, they used to go to a pool, but the pools are closed, so they've had to pivot and go to an app. So we have to gamify and encourage people to actually take part in the exercises on land, not just in the water. That's quite good fun. We're even helping on a test and trace app, but not the NHS one. It's in a different country. So today, I propose to take you through a little bit on what I think data is, then what gamification is, then how they mix together, and then hopefully we'll give you a tool or two to talk that through. And although Ushi said turn your mics off, there are a couple of moments where I might ask you questions. So at the very least, I'll ask you to do it in the chat, but I might ask you to raise your hand and bring you on if you've got something to say. And feel free to introduce yourself to each other in the chat as well. Okay. And then there'll be plenty of time for a Q&A at the end. So what is data? There's a lot of definitions out there. This one is my favorite, particularly around big data. So an information asset that's characterized by high volume, so there's a lot of it, velocity, so it's going really fast, faster than the mind can handle, and lots of different sources, variety, which makes it potentially quite difficult to handle in just the human brain. So that's the underlying issue with big data, but it's got some positives to it. So there's a lot of data being produced all the time, whether it's astronomical data or the data from games being produced. In fact, I've got a quiz question for you. How much is the big data market going to be worth? And I was wondering if you could raise your hands if you think it's A, using the Zoom hand raise. What do you think? What about B, $123 billion? Or C, 232 billion? Okay. It's a really big number. So it's a big market. So that's putting data in its silo. Then I want to think about games and gamification. And the key for me here is to find out what games you play. So what I'd really like you to do is in the chat, if you could tell me what your favorite game is, whether it's a board game, video game, mobile phone game, a sport, and also maybe what the most recent game you played is, because it's often a different one while we've been in lockdown. And that'll be quite useful. And I'll refer back to that at stages. So my favorite games are strategy games like Civilization, where I get to take over the world in some way. And also puzzle solvers like Candy Crush or Candy Crush equivalents like Homescapes, which is what I'm playing. But I noticed the other day I've played 1,700 levels of that. So maybe I've been playing that a bit too much. There's some good ones coming in. Uno, yeah. And a board game of Civilization. Okay, that's going on my homework. I like this. Okay, thank you. So it's quite a wide range. So generally people are split between board games, consoles, PC games, mobile games. And we have to take that into account. So what is gamification? There's a few definitions out there. The most common one is the use of game elements in non-game contexts, but I prefer this one from Kevin Werbach, that gamification is the process of making activities more game-like. This basically tells us what we're supposed to do with gamification, which is why I like it. Generally speaking, it's around, what's the word I'm looking for? I think of it as a really useful practical framework for applying all the psychological and motivational psychology theories that are out there to our day-to-day world. So that's why it's proven to be quite a big and successful industry, because it takes the theory and makes it practical. And it could be something really simple like this I found on Twitter, which just liking something gives you lots of nice visual feedback like you get from games. Yeah, it doesn't have to be big and complicated, gamification. If you want to think about what it's for, I think it really boils down to changing people's behaviors. So very simply, when we're applying some game mechanics or game elements, we're either doing it to encourage less of a behavior or more of a behavior. So a project we worked on with Southern Water was about getting people to use less water. That'd be less of a behavior. And quite often from a corporate perspective, we want people to buy more or be more loyal. So more of a behavior, or log in more often, or whatever it is we might want them to do. So if in doubt, that's what we use it for. I also want to flag up that generally speaking, gamification makes things harder for your customer, your user, whoever it is. All games are basically a series of voluntary obstacles. So instead of just running along the track, you might have hurdles that you have to jump over, and this makes it more fun. Okay? If you're into running and jumping, it makes it more fun. A different way to look at that is, I like this, it's user experience design or user interface design is often about making things simpler for people. So removing problems, whereas we're about giving people extra problems and making them more engaged. So for instance, traditionally, you might want a piece of content on your website that you want everyone to read. So you would put it front and center, you'd make it really obvious and point arrows at it, say, read this. Whereas what we'll do in gamification is we might hide something. We might hide Easter eggs around the website, or on my own website, I've got a bit of content I really want you to engage with, but you can't even access it until you've succeeded at playing 7 levels of a computer game first. I'll probably share a link to that at the end, give you a challenge. Yeah. Now, we get less people reading that bit of content, but they're more likely to do something useful with it. And that's the end of the point, is the end behavior is what we want to change. And that's where gamification is really useful. There's quite a few theories. Sometimes I cover the neuroscience and the base psychology of what powers gamification, triggering dopamine, things like that. But this is a nice layout for putting it all together in one place. This is Andrzej Marzuski's 3 Layers of Motivation. He's author of a great book, by the way, called Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play. And I'm interviewing on Friday online for free if you want to find out a bit more. This basically says we need the base layer in place, and this is based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the most part, which is, it says we need these things in place before we can look at the higher levels of our engagement. And gamification tends to come in the emotional, the attachment levels. So this assumes we're healthy enough, we're being paid enough, that we can then think about more stuff than just survival. Okay, so everything about gamification assumes that's in place. Most of our work comes in this middle layer, the emotional or intrinsic layer. And this is a combination of self-determination theory from Decky and Ryan, and also a bit from Dan Pink's research on what motivates people in the corporate environment. And the best bits of that are put together into what we call RAMP, or relatedness, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And this is about the fact that we are more motivated and more engaged if we do things together with other people, because we're social creatures. It's relatedness. In autonomy, it's about giving people choice, power over their decisions. So if I've got someone who's a new starter in my business, I would want to give them flexibility in where they work, when they work, and very much so in how they work. Yeah, the more autonomy we give people, the more they are motivated. And in a gamification example, this could be just about giving them other sorts of choices and the ability to customize things as well. So customize the layout, maybe customize my avatar, give me some choices in there. Don't force me down one track, give me some different content to explore, that sort of thing. Mastery is about getting, well, the fact that we really enjoy getting better at things, at mastering new skills. And this really resonates with what we see in gameplay as well. You might start a game and immediately your character dies, but you continue because you want to get better at it. And that's mastery. And the great thing about mastery is when we master a new skill, the feeling of reward from that lasts for a very long time. They've shown that if you give someone a bonus and money, no matter how big it is, the motivational aspect of it might last 2 to 4 weeks. Whereas if you enable someone to learn a new skill, they may still be motivated by that 6 months, a year, or more later. So by far a better way to go. And the last one is purpose. This is the fact we're more motivated to do stuff if it's for a good cause, for instance, like eradicating disease or poverty. So something world-saving, saving the environment. Or it could be something meaningful to ourselves, like quitting smoking or losing weight, something like that. Everything we do towards that purpose is more motivational. Okay, so whatever we're doing, whenever I'm looking at a gamification project, I'm trying to make sure all 4 of these are ticked. And they really quite distinctly parallel what we see in neuroscience around what motivates people. And then the top layer, the trivial or extrinsic layer, is what people traditionally think is gamification, the sort of points, badges, leaderboards and things. But we only use these where we've worked out how they're going to trigger the emotional layer. Yeah, so points are great as a way of feeding back to people that they're getting better at something on the route to mastery. We might put someone in a guild or a team for relatedness. We'll give them badges to prove their progress through. And for autonomy, we'll give them worlds to explore, or different tactics or strategies they might use within the game, if I think about Civilization as an example. And then for purpose, well, we'll give them some sort of epic purpose, like eradicate the zombie hordes, that sort of thing, or defeat the alien invasion, or it could be something directly related to your organizational goals. Either tends to work, actually, so long as it's meaningful to the people playing. Okay, so if I wanted you to take one thing away from this slide, it's that actually we spend 90% of our time in gamification working on the emotional intrinsic layer. That's the bit we need to trigger in people to really engage them. If you get really good at this, then you can study flow from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He studied mountain climbers to begin with. He was interested in why they would spend hours on end utterly focused climbing a mountain, because if they weren't utterly focused, they'd fall off and potentially kill themselves. And then what they do is when they finished, they're really keen to go and find another mountain to climb. So what that means is there's something about that state that's very enjoyable. And he coined the word flow to describe it. But basically, when you're in a state of flow, all other distractions fall away, you potentially lose track of time, and you're just really engaged. So he studied mountain climbers to begin with, then performance athletes, then creatives, artists, and so on. And then even in the world of work. And actually what we're generally trying to do is get people to be, what's the word? In this state, not too often, but fairly often, so that they're really motivated. And the trick to it is to offer someone a challenge that's just challenging enough for their level of skill. Yeah. So actually games like Candy Crush, and they do this really well. When we level up, we're then going to a new level of difficulty. That's what keeps it interesting. And this is what we aim to do in a gamification program as well. Particularly if we're going for long-term engagement, we need to keep ratcheting up the difficulty level to make it interesting. Okay, this is the bit that adds to the budget, because you can't just create a one-size-fits-all game. You have to think about what you're going to do with people as they get better at it. Okay. This is the bit where I'd like to have a discussion with you all. Yeah, so in terms of the projects you're working on, what behavior changes would you like to bring about? And what data would be useful for this? Now, I'm happy for you to do this in the chat, or also to raise your hand, and I will call you up and ask you, because this, I really want to be interactive and not just me chatting to you all for the whole time. And I'm just looking at what people have been using as well in the chat. I quite like Forest, that's been mentioned. That's a good gamified app for getting you to focus on things. But in terms of the projects you're working on, what are you doing? Pop that in the chat for me. And then I'll talk about the behavior changes that you might want. Someone's going to have a go. That's more like it. They're coming in now. So that's quite topical, Sarah. Hygiene practices with Dettol. So I'm guessing the behavior changes you'd like to bring about are those hygiene practices. What else we got? Encouraging sustainability. Yeah, cool. FinTech, helping people saving money. So that's probably about helping people make better financial decisions. In the workplace, supporting employees, learning, sharing, and doing. That's probably the other market that's very popular at the moment. Now that everyone's working online as well, is how to do that digitally. Fundraising, that's a good one for a non-profit as well. So it's got the purpose built in, so that'll make it easier to do. Education, training, yeah. Oh, interested in using gamification to encourage litter collection and disposal. I like that one. I've got my students at the university, when they pick gamification projects to work on, quite often go for rubbish, recycling, litter disposal, that sort of thing. Changes in behavior. They're quite nice to focus in on a particular thing. There was an example in Brighton. I don't have a picture of it to hand, but it was a bin for cigarette butts, and you could vote for something different, like which film was better, Star Trek or Star Wars, and people would pick up a butt and put it in there. It's like a cunning way, in a short, easy way to get a behavior change. And my question here is about what data would be useful. So in that instance, the data is how many cigarette butts would be picked up. In hygiene practices with Dettol, I'm guessing we're trying to collect data on how people use it. Yeah. I just got distracted by saying flow state for knitters. I might come back to that one. Good. These are good uses. So the thing to think about is what's the data that we need in order to encourage these behavior changes. Yeah, because we need someone to then work on that. This is good. I wanted to plant this seed. I'll come back to this. So we've got what is data, we've got what is gamification. How do they work together? Okay, I've got 4 key ways that I think they work well together. The first one that was used popularly was using games to crowdsource big data analysis. So where we've already got a lot of data and it's difficult to get enough compute time potentially to work out and analyze that amount of data, that's where games to crowdsource it come in. So as an example, one of the first ones was Fold It, which was from a university experience in Washington, DC. They'd spent 14 years, 12 years trying to solve a protein folding issue for trying to cure AIDS. And then another department helped them build a game called Fold It, which I can probably show you while I'm talking. And because it was for a meaningful purpose, they were able to get 14,000 people to play the game, and they solved this protein folding issue within just 10 days. Yeah, so the game helped source lots of people to work through the data. And this has become quite popular. There are now games, or have been games like Play to Cure and Genes in Space from cancer research. This eventually Fold It had 57,000 players. Also, they used it to source a vaccine for Ebola a couple of years ago when that was happening. This was a good one from EVE Online, Project Discovery, to classify human cells. And in 2 weeks, the players submitted more than 13 million classifications, okay, which is impressive. And if you want to have a go at this at all, there's a great actual data science competition called Kaggle, where you can find data sets and practice your data analysis skills and then submit stuff to see if you can win. So I like that. It's taking the data and gamifying it. So have a go at that when you have a chance. Okay, that's the first one. The second one is actually using gamification to generate the big data. Maybe we don't have enough data. The classic example of this is actually LinkedIn. They use various gamification techniques to get you to complete your profile. As much information as possible. That's what their business model is around. So you used to have a progress bar. Now it's a circle, a profile strength. And it encourages you to fill in different bits. In fact, they used to have it all as one thing, and then they've broken it up into bite-sized stuff so you don't feel overwhelmed, which makes it harder to demo, but it's all in there, gradually getting you to complete more and more. And we see it quite often used in CRMs or anywhere, customer relationship management databases, anywhere where you need to gather more and more data, we're seeing more games happening. Yeah, so and it's more about gamifying someone to complete something. So we see quite a lot of surveys now, which are gamified, so that people will actually complete what they're doing. In fact, there's a great book. It's not that one. Called Games and Gamification in Market Research, which is all about this whole industry of using games to get data from people in fun and interesting ways. So for instance, you might have an avatar, and the virtual goods you choose to customize your avatar give insights into your user or customer, which is good fun. Now the third one, this is probably the biggest thing, crossover for the data industry, and I think one of the more interesting ones from an art perspective as well, is how games and gamification are used to understand data. What do I mean by that? Well, actually, let's put it in perspective first. So the fastest growing software segment for big data is in fact visualization. So we've got all this data. How do we work with it? Is it of any use to us if we can't visualize it? And this is something games do really, really, really well. Take one of my favorite games, Civilization. It automatically displays an awful lot of information to you on one screen. And it might take a little bit of getting used to, but it's a really good way. The human brain handles maps quite well. So that's the first thing. Down that side, we've got all the available units. I can see the health bar. So there's a bit of data about a unit at a glance. It's highlighting which one I've got to make a decision on next. And that's a really useful thing that games do well. They don't just show you the data. They actually do a little bit of analysis for you. They say, right, this is the next thing, next place where you need to make a decision. Okay, so that's not necessarily telling you what to do. It's just telling you where your input is needed. And that actually makes work or life much more interesting. Sid Meier, who created Civilization and many other games, basically said a game is a series of interesting and important decisions. And that's what makes it really good fun. And I completely agree. And the same is true in terms of work or gamifying your day-to-day life. It's the interesting decisions that motivate you and make it interesting. What else does it do? It's got some information about some stuff going on in the background. It's got highlighting the city status. And within that, it's all broken up into bits. There's a lot of care and attention goes into visualizing in a game, which means I can then very quickly work with an awful lot of data and just get on with it. Yeah, and this is why games are really good at it, because they don't want you pausing and analyzing and spending a lot of time thinking. They want you to just be in flow. So they had to get good at visualization. So to take you back to the chat, what data for those behavior changes we were talking about would you like to be able to visualize? Yeah. And then be able to work with it better. But first of all, it's like, what's the data? What could you visualize? So I'm going to wait a moment for you to add to the chat. Now I'm thinking about how you'd visualize some of the things you'd already put in. There was an example we looked at the University of Brighton, which was around working out which floors of which buildings had fire safety stewards and volunteers. And it was a spreadsheet where the data was held. And it wasn't really working. Although it had a way of visualizing it, they didn't really know where to put their attention. So the idea there was we took it and created actual buildings with the data. And if there was a floor of a building without a fire marshal, then there'd be smoke coming out of that floor. And if there were no fire marshals in the whole building, the building would be on fire. This really quickly enables you to work out where you really need to go and recruit new volunteers, and fast. Yeah, much more exciting as well than a spreadsheet. But by visualizing it, it really shows you where the decisions need to be made. So what we've got. So we've got how long people are spending washing their hands for the data. So how would you visualize that? Something time related, I think. Or maybe like a bucket filling up with grime and germs and things. There's some fun way to put the information on a screen. How people work, the learning materials they need, their interactions with that data, and how successful it is. There's quite a few things going on there, which is good. That's why we need to visualize the data well. One of the things I don't like generally is dashboards, which is such a commonly required thing in computer systems. But I find that people just stare at a dashboard, and after the first time when they've looked at everything, every time they go back, they don't really know what they're supposed to do with all that information on the screen. Whereas the game highlighting the next unit that needs orders or a city that's in peril tells us where we need to start. Much better than a dashboard, in my humble opinion. Tell people where the next decision is. I like this one. What type of litter it is and how much of it is where. That potentially start with a map. That's a great one for doing a bit of visualization. And suddenly my brain's going, is there a version of like Pokemon Binit we could create? Or something fun. Get people out there doing stuff, throwing litter in bins to grow their Pokemon and develop them. Cool, I like that. Thanks, Steve. And what was my fourth one? Why big data with gamification? And this is the core of this presentation actually is, once we've got more data, we can personalize the experience for people. We can deliver more engaging activities for our players. Yeah. Even within my small company, we all like different types of games. So to think we would, all of us enjoy or engage in exactly the same type of game in the same particular way would be madness. So we need to personalize the experiences. We need to find out what the different games people play are, because there are different things about them. You know, earlier we had like Uno, Civilization, Exploding Kittens, great game, Pokemon Go, Lexulus, Skyrim, Boggle, Cranium. These are all very different. So what do? We have to personalize. So the latest video games have millions of players, but they all experience a different game. It's going to have been personalized and customized based on the things they enjoy and the types of challenges they like within that game. So as soon as someone starts playing a modern computer game, the system is analyzing your choices and trying to provide more of the things you enjoy, more challenges, or maybe it's more narrative. Maybe I'm really enjoying the storyline, so it'll send me off that way and give me more options down there. Maybe I like engaging with the characters. Maybe I like doing more of the social, and it's just going to highlight more of those or throw more of those decisions in front of me. And suddenly you've got millions of people playing the same game, getting a completely different experience that really suits them. And this has become possible with the use of machine learning and AI. And the more relevant we make the game or the experience, then the more engaging it is. And the more likely they'll stick with us and they'll do whatever the behavior change we want is. Yeah, whether it's picking up litter more often, whether it's using less water. If it's a personalized journey, using all this lovely data we generate and visualize, we've got great opportunities. And there is a lot of data, you know, so even back in 2016, gamers were producing more than 50 terabytes of data a day. That's a much bigger number now. There's some great stuff if you want to go deeper into this. That's why I'm sharing this link, and I will make sure the slides are shared afterwards as well to you all. The balance, of course, as well as what's interesting, is keeping the skill level right so that people don't get too frustrated, which is the point of this one, to remind me to tell you that. So keeping them in the state of flow doesn't mean just ratcheting up the difficulty every time. If someone's stuck, you need to give them the opportunity to retake a level, things like that. Cool, I'm perfectly on time. This is quite rare for me, and normally I'm over time by this point. What I want to give you is a tool that we use that I think really fits with personalizing, using the data to personalize someone's journey. And this we call the player journey. There are versions of it in marketing as well, the marketing and the user journey. And what we find in gamification is there's these 4 steps we need to go through. And if you miss any of them, your project doesn't work properly. Yeah, maybe it doesn't, it fizzles. Or maybe like no one actually plays. Maybe it dies off, even though people were excited to begin with. And the key thing here is there's a scaffolding or habit building phase, which is the 3rd one in, which is where we put most effort in game design. That's the daily habit we want someone to have, like picking up a bit of litter and putting it in a bin. But we have to get people excited first. So this player journey, the 4 phases, discovery is making people excited about downloading your app in the first place. Yeah, or taking part in the online training, or whatever the program is, exciting people first, or scaring them. If I was selling insurance, I would start with something scary in the discovery phase. Onboarding is then about making things easier, not easier, about getting people comfortable with how the game's going to work. Okay, so they feel, all right, I can do this. I'll give it a go. Okay, and this is something that's often missing from corporate software, so we say. Unless you use Clippy or something. That was a good example of onboarding for some people. Then you've got the scaffolding phase, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about. That is the overall game. And then the mastery phase is around what we do with the people who are doing really well in the game. And if we don't do something with them, they will potentially go from being our best players to the ones that are negative about the experience, because a game shouldn't just fizzle out. So you have to offer them things like more content, more levels to play, or give them a chance to mentor new people through the journey. That's one of my favorite ways of rewarding mastery. Or actually just wrap up the game and say, hey, it's completed. Here's a certificate, a trophy, an award. I say, well done, it's finished. Okay, that one's the cheapest one, but not the greatest one for keeping ongoing motivation for a very long time. Now I've got an example here that I want to show you, which I think covers all 4 steps in one 2-minute video. I'll translate. You've got 30 seconds. If you can climb up, jump and grab the jacket, you win it. So that was quite a cool example because it was quite a physical example as well. So in the discovery phase, the excitement is generated by the floor actually moving and everything disappearing, and you have to hang on to the wall. Yeah, you are emotionally triggered by that, which is what you want from discovery. The onboarding is actually quite literal as well. You hang on to the wall and you're learning the first part of the game, which is going to be that you're going to climb up the wall. The game itself is to climb up the wall and take a leap. Yeah, so it's to defeat that height issue that some of us have. And you could see even the people who missed the jacket had a big smile on their face. The game was to climb up the wall and leap off it. Mastery was demonstrated by winning the jacket. Yeah, and the people who won that are probably going to be wearing it for weeks or months and enjoy telling people how they won it. Yeah, so it wraps up the game nicely. And what I will say is even the people who jumped off and missed, I bet from their grins, they probably asked, can I have another go? That's when you know you've got a good game. Yeah, so we want those 4 steps completed. That journey is really important. And so many things don't include that at the moment. Yeah, do you get people excited about your new app so that, you know, onboard them? Oh, all these things. Anyway, how do we go about it? What we do is everything about motivating people is about people. And therefore, we need to think about emotions. And this is the thing that tends to get missed out, I think, in many design processes. So if in doubt, if you get stuck, just think about what emotion you're trying to make someone feel during the player journey. Yeah. And what I like to get people to do is to come up with at least 3 emotions for each phase. So we're going to take people on an emotional journey through take our player on an emotional journey. You know, think about it like watching a film, whatever. Your character that you're following is having this emotional story happening to them. And that's what we need someone to do. And the more quirky the emotion, the easier it is to design an interesting game. So for the discovery phase, generally you want to make people interested and curious, but everyone's trying to do that. Perhaps we can throw in an extra emotion. So I have a client in Cairo in Egypt. They wanted to create some gamification around getting people to take the stairs more instead of getting the lift. And to challenge me, I think, because they were having fun with it, they chose an emotion of like romance for the discovery phase. And they're like, well, what are you going to be able to do with that? I was like, that's brilliant. We can do loads with that. So in terms of our imagery and challenges, we'll be like, the more you use the stairs, the better you'll look, the more likely you'll find the woman or partner of your dreams. Yeah. Maybe we'll have blind dating competitions in the stairs or something. That sounds a bit dodgy, but it gives you a chance to come up with something much more interesting and enticing by having a more interesting emotion in there. Yeah. So at least 3 at each level. And that's because generally people get stuck on using the same basic emotions each time. The example on the screen is one from an innovation challenge, a team-based innovation challenge. So these are the emotions we wanted to take them through on the challenge. So get them anticipating and curious, but also empowered. This was in an organization where they tended to feel not listened to. So it was about highlighting what changes would actually happen if they submitted ideas. The onboarding phase was about getting comfortable with the system, how it worked, how you would submit your ideas and innovations, and also introducing you to the other people you'd be working with, and that would be that you could bounce ideas off and that could help improve your idea as well as part of the process. Having done that, the main phase, the game itself, the emotions we want while they're submitting innovations were to feel inspired, but also to feel that sense of community, like they're all working together to innovate, and to focus on really important ones. So all of these emotions help us design something, the text and the journey that we're working on are much more interesting. And then at the end, of course, we want them to be recognized for what they put in, feel some joy and definitely some pride, but also that social element, protective of the other people who've been working in it as well, and a sense of achievement. Seems logical when you do it like this. If ever I see a gamification project going wrong, it tends to be that they've stopped thinking about the emotions. And this generally is triggered when we're putting things through committee. The emotions get forgotten and it's all about the design or the branding or things like that. So always refer back to the emotions side of things. And there are some cool tools out there to help you. This is my favorite emotion wheel. There's a lot out there. This one I like because about 50% of the emotions are positive. Whereas a lot of the ones designed by psychologists, it's like 80% negative emotions, which is not necessarily what we're after. So the basics that people tend to go for are those 6 in the middle. Oh, the only emotions we feel like love, fear, anger, sadness, surprise, and joy. Whereas actually around the outside, we've got much more interesting ones that we could get people to think. Yeah. Hysterical as opposed to fear. Yeah. I mean, if I was going in for an insurance company, I would definitely be going down the hysterical, panic, helpless route. For mastery, my students once came up with an idea of using awestruck and speechless as the reward for if a lecturer was a really good lecturer. And so when they had to try and design how they would make that emotion happen for that lecturer, they came up with more interesting ideas, such as finding every student that lecturer had taught in the last few years and having them in the room when they were giving out the trophy or award. Couldn't do that right now, be maximum 6, but hey. But that impression gave them a chance to design something much more interesting. So, and if in doubt, think about 3 emotions for each of the phases. I'm going to get you to do a bit more thinking now. So what data are you already working with or that you think you could capture? And then what emotions do you want people to experience? And then we can have a think about what that data-driven player journey would look like. And what I'd really like to do, if the always possible people would help, would be to get someone up and we'll work through one of the ideas. I'm thinking like Steve Creed and the litter collection one. I think that would be something everyone could support. So is there a chance we can call him up if he's up for it? Are you up for it, Steve?
Yes, I'd be willing to share some bits of information, but could we make it Chatham House, because we are developing something that could be commercial at some point?
Okay, I will try. But on the plus side, anything I tell you, you can use for free. How about that?
Okay, we'll do a deal.
Cool. Because they are recording this, so we'll try and keep it generic in that case.
Okay.
Okay. But if you could give me a bit of insight into like something about the litter collection process. Where are we trying to do it? Is it within a particular site, or is it countrywide, something?
Okay, so the idea is that there's lots of regulation coming in about how we're going to handle recycling of materials, things like extended producer responsibility. So people like certain soft drinks manufacturers will want to know where their bottles and things are ending up. So they're probably willing to pay for that if they can find out. There's a lot of contracts for collection of litter, which are pretty much designed around the idea that you just go up and down a street at a certain time on a regular basis. But some streets don't have much litter and others get loads of litter. So if you knew where the litter was, you could reschedule it in a way that might be much more efficient and maybe more cost effective. And then ultimately, the other side of it is that there's a lot of opportunity to promote things to people. So the data that we're working with is a combination of where the data is, what it is, and then at the same time offering rewards that are related to that. And the way in which people's emotions would work are, we're interested in creating something that's exciting. So a lot of this isn't developed yet, that would get people like you identified Pokemon or something like that. We have some visual identification AI software that can tell you what it is, so you can just take a picture of it. So there might be characters that would swallow different types of waste that might be interesting, so that you're getting things happening. And there may be some digital advertising related to it, where people, once they did identify things, might get messages about products that they might be interested in as a result of identifying things that they're picking up. So it's kind of like a personalization going on. As people become more into it, they may decide they're particularly interested in plastic bottles or tin cans or whatever.
I like that.
And so they might then get certain kind of messages about things like that. And then the other side of it is that with a lot of the challenges at the moment with COVID and PPE, there's a lot of waste PPE appearing around. And so knowing where that is, and there's a whole health issue going on there as well. So there's another kind of dimension. So there's lots of end ideas in there, and there's lots of a starting point, but the bit in the middle is the bit we're still kind of putting together. And I'm not a games person. I'm just like a business person who's got involved in this. Yeah.
That's fair enough. I mean, I started as a business person who just happened to play games, and then studied it a bit deeper. So what data do you already have that you can already capture? Or is that one of the things we need to gamify, is how to find out where the litter is?
That's one of the things we need to gamify. I mean, we have approaches that can tell us what it is. You know, you talked about the cigarette stubs. Mm-hmm. So we're not focused on any particular kind. We've got some systems that you can use with your phone to identify what the waste is. But the challenge is, how do you get them to go and take a picture of it and then dispose of it? Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. I think the easier one is probably, what emotions do you want people to experience?
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts while we were going through that slide?
Yeah. So on the emotion side, I mean, I think the thing is that there are people at the moment who are very worried about litter and waste more generally, and fly tipping and things like that. But they tend to be very they're quite a niche group. And that's what's motivating them to use existing apps that allow you to report these kind of things. What we're interested in is getting people excited. So we want people to be more in all the gaming people with the emotion that's going to say, well, I'd like to go out and get a bit of excitement out of this. And maybe they'll get at some exercise because they're out wandering around, and they might want to go out for a walk, and they'll feel good about the fact they're outside, as well as doing something while they're outside. So there's a kind of I want to go out and do this again. So something about interest and curiosity that then leads to some kind of, I guess, is somewhere in the onboarding and then the mastery side of it, where they're starting to feel like, you know, this is great, and maybe I've got some rewards that I'm interested in, and I want to get another reward. So there's something about continuing, and then there may be parts of it. I mean, this could be any way it could work, but you might then get feedback that says, well, you know, you've just if it's going to be interesting to people, you've just reduced carbon emissions by, you know, some amount, or, you know,
this is where you start having to think about visualizing feedback.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, like that could be a balloon or something of a certain size, or there's all kinds of things, but there's lots of stuff in there that's about how do you take those kind of emotions that are generated by a Pokemon type activity and convert it into something that's much more about ultimately litter, but not you know, using the same emotions but in a different way.
Yeah, so you need
helpful?
to go on a journey, but I like that. I mean, I'm going to give you a tip here, which I think a good game is built around skills. So that's a skill-based game. And we suggested a similar thing for the Test and Trace app, which was about a skill-based prediction game. So, and this I think would work quite well with this as well. So in the Test and Trace type app, one of the things you want is for people not to gather in the same place. Yeah. So this was particularly around the time everyone was going down the beach on a sunny day. And so the idea was I would open the app and I would predict where most people would be. So what would be the busiest place the next day? Yeah. So I'm trying to train my brain into working that out so that I can avoid it later.
Yeah.
And then you could go there. I'm thinking about your litter one, as I could predict where I think will be the most rubbish tomorrow, or where someone might have flight tipped. Then I could go there, take a picture and submit it. Yeah. And earn some points. Now the point is, if you can skill up and get people better and better at this, then they will feel like they're getting on this route to mastery. And in fact, they're getting better and better at it. So you're going to get better and better quality data as well. But if you can build a skill-based challenge into something, then you're going to end up with a more interesting game. And I feel like that way, you know, you'd come up with some interesting titles, I think, like Litter Expert, or more, you know, the Dalek type Exterminator of Litter, stuff like that. Have some fun with it.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Debbie. That's very helpful.
The other one I would have a look at would be something like Waze, which Google bought, which was the maps and driving thing. So there they gamified getting people to actually report like traffic obstacles live. Yeah, so there's a few examples of this sort of thing out there, and that Waze is good because it's map based. Pokemon Go is another good one to look at for this. And anything where, I mean, actually I would take a look carefully at some gambling games where you're predicting future scores and stuff, and how they lay out how you interact with that in terms of predicting where there'll be litter. And then I would have people being experts in, you know, I'm going to be an expert at spotting fly tipping. Yeah. Or I'm going to be expert at finding where McDonald's wrappers are, or where Pepsi Max can is, or something.
Yeah. I was avoiding brands because I thought that could be a bit contentious at some point.
Well, probably.
I mean, we'd obviously use brands in the game, but I wasn't going to talk about brands that are highly littered. That's all.
Well, the other way to approach that is to have user-driven challenges as well. So get them to customize and create their own challenges. Like, oh, I'm really fed up with such and such brand. I see their stuff everywhere, and then see if they can get people to buy into solving that particular challenge.
That's a really good idea.
That's what I like people to say when they're listening. This is good. I think we got time to do one more as well. And there's some great stuff coming up in the chat that you should have a look at as well, Steve.
Yeah, I've been looking. Thank you.
Is Sarah Leach up for a chat about the washing hands one and the Dettol?
Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Classic Zoom.
It's fine. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenge?
Yeah, well, we're just throwing around some ideas at the moment, but we've seen some success with things like, I think it's TikTok filters and TikTok challenges in other markets. And I don't think they would land necessarily as well, you know, like TikTok songs in the UK. So we're just trying to kind of think very broadly about ways that we can encourage, I guess, people to have better visibility of how often they're washing their hands, if they're actually doing it for 20 seconds. So I'm sure people don't really realise how long 20 seconds is. I don't know anyone who gets all the way through the second happy birthday. So yeah, we're quite open to exploring some options at the moment, but obviously the key goal is making sure that people are kind of more conscientious, like more kind of active awareness about how often they're washing their hands. That's
cool. Remind me by ping me a message and I'll send you a link to a talk I saw at a conference at Kai Play last year, the Computer Human Interaction Conference. Because there was a game called Germ Busters, something like that. Anyway, they'd fitted various devices into sinks and measured the effect of showing people some feedback on how long they were washing their hands for, and then measured like how much bacteria there was on the door handles before and after the game. And actually it was quite interesting, and it did work, having a bit of feedback, gamified feedback.
I think I saw something kind of similar. I think it was a trial in a hospital where there was obviously they want all healthcare practitioners, doctors, nurses to wash their hands before they enter a patient's room. And I can't remember exactly which way around it was, but it was something like if you forgot to wash your hands before you went in, then the overall team score dropped. So you had to kind of, if you washed your hands beforehand, then it meant the team average went up.
So teams is great. Yeah, this is that relatedness bit I was talking about. So wherever possible, I would put people into teams. And then you got a bit of peer pressure on each other as well, which is good.
Peer pressure for good.
Peer pressure for good. So what sort of data are you able to capture at the moment? Because I think that's the biggest issue with working out how long people are washing their hands for in a place where you can't really watch them.
No, to be honest, it would all be self-reported, which is very unreliable. So yeah, we kind of, we wouldn't put any kind of monitoring obviously in people's homes. It might be a little bit easier if we were working in organizations, like institutions and things like that, but no, at the moment we're kind of starting from scratch.
Okay, so in my opinion you'll need a different player journey, whether it's a home user or someone in a workplace, for that very reason. Gathering that data is the hardest bit, I would agree, but self-reporting can work. If you think about apps like MyFitnessPal, where originally people had to just self-report what calories they're eating, what food they're eating.
Yeah.
If you can get people buying into the concept and giving them something useful that occurs as a result of that data. So this is where it's important to work out how you're going to visualize the results to them and the emotions that should trigger. So the aesthetics you would use in that journey.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about was obviously remembering to wash your hands when you come in from having been outside is one of the key things. So if we were to go down some kind of a route of an app, and I don't really know if it's going to be feasible, but if we were to go down that kind of route, then potentially you could set it up to ping a notification to somebody, as they're getting to their driveway, and sort of say you're about to walk in through your front door. Don't go straight to the kitchen, go and wash your hands or something.
I like that. So more of a very geographically based journey. Involves quite a bit of tracking, but a few iBeacons and things. I mean, you could do it with technology, but I'm not sure people would buy that for their homes.
No, this is the really difficult balance between wanting to encourage the right behaviours, but without wanting to be kind of intrusive into somebody's personal life.
Yeah, I'm thinking there's probably a physical way to do it. There's been quite a lot of tests and gamified things tried on men's urinals. So there might be a little fly printed on it to get them to aim better.
Yeah.
Or I've definitely seen a loo seat, which when you lifted it had a message on it to remind you to do something, things like that. So when an activity happens, So maybe there's like, I don't know, there's got to be some ways to do it, like a timed tap as well that deliberately runs for 20 seconds if you're washing your hands.
I think it's really, really irritating, like kids' soap dispensers that play a song they've been around for a really long time. And I think there was maybe a Minions one. But I wonder if there's something that obviously it already exists, but for that was for entertainment. But potentially if you had one where you knew that the music or the noise or whatever played for a certain amount of time.
I mean, that's actually a great idea. because then you could get people to customize what they download as
yeah.
well. So, I mean, I'd have a 20-second Mission Impossible theme tune or the countdown track, did it, washed, type thing. Yeah, and so once you've got customization going on, you've got a more interesting player journey. Yeah, so the most popular downloads, you can share that for people, and people can like then virally share their favorite choice. And then you've got people doing the work for you. And then it becomes more of a trending TikTok challenge, as it were. So there you've got your TikTok style challenge, 20 seconds, choose the right music. So that's the challenge itself, which is a bit different from TikTok. Normally it's about the same challenge done to the same music, but hey, that's a small change. TikTok, by the way, I think is a really good example of gamification in action, because it's generally people working really hard to master a skill and then film that to a particular music thing. So that it is challenge based. I like the music download idea. That's worth testing. Yeah, even if it's just an app on the phone. So people generally these days take their phones in with them, don't they? It's just you need a way to trigger it. But yeah.
Cool. I'll play around with some ideas with the brand team.
Yeah, give that a go. I like that.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on that one. Very, very helpful. Okay, let's move on. So, good timing. Today, I reckon we've looked at 4 gamified ways of working with big data. So just to remind you, we've been using it to crowdsource analysis if we've got too much data in the first place. We can use it to generate big data. So that was a good example from the litter side of things. We don't necessarily know where it is, but we can build a game to find out where the litter is. Then we need to be able to visualize the data so that people can do something useful with it. And that's where games are really good. The interfaces are a way to play a few online games or even board games. Think about the interface, that's how it's feeding information to you and how you could use that in your project. And then, of course, so worth customizing and personalizing the journey using all the data we've gathered so that people have the most engaging experience they can. That's the essence of modern games, and that's what we steal from in gamification, is what the video game industry or the other games industries are doing well. Okay. I want to give you some tools as well as the player journey. So we have, I helped design our own success framework. So you run a gamification project through this. There's various steps. That's very small so that you can't read it properly, because actually to get access to it, you've got to play our game at gamificationplus.uk game. This is the 7 levels of computer game. It's called Pete in Gamification Land. It was designed by my team. And apparently that's me, the icon. And every time the character dies, I die a little. So when you're playing, if you could avoid killing my character, that would be great. You're just taking minutes off my life each time. And it's quite simple to play. Yeah, there's 7 levels. You have to collect all the icons. Of course, it tries to get you in a state of flow, so it will get harder each level. People are generally cursing on about level 5, which is a sign of a good game. Just when you're play testing, top tip, if people are like cursing, swearing, and excited, you've probably got the difficulty level about right, generally speaking. So have a go at that, and you can download that project framework and some guidance around using it. We've also got plenty of other resources on the website, such as links to talks, white papers, and so on. But thank you very much for taking part in that. I'm going to hand back to facilitators to see what questions we've got. And we've got some great stuff in the chat as well. So I might look through that if there's no questions. But
Thank you, Pete. That was absolutely fascinating. While we wait for any questions to come through, if you want to put any questions in the chat, and then we can bring you in and you can unmute and share video.
I see you brushing, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, there's more than 2 gamified toothbrushes out there, particularly for kids. So you brush correctly, and then you're able to play in a game to it.
Yeah. I was wanting to pick up on a point, actually. Going back to personalisation and keeping people engaged, should we all get more of what we want? Because sometimes behaviour change relies on a bit of challenge. I'm thinking about things like Facebook. It gives you all of what you want, and then you can end up in an echo chamber where your opinions aren't getting challenged and you're only seeing one point of view, your own. So how how do you how do you overcome that type of thing?
Oh, that's a nice big subject. Thanks.
Sorry.
I mean, I think that's a good one because what's the word I'm looking for? If they set slightly different challenges in Facebook, for instance, we could do it. Like, it could be just simple, like step out of your comfort zone today. We're promoting one of your friends you don't normally listen to, because they use an algorithm already that filters what you're seeing because there's too much information. So a simple algorithm that says, hey, today we're paying more attention to this friend. So that's how I would put it. It's like making stronger relationships with your friends. Hey, cool, I'll buy into that. And then see more information from that. I mean, personally, I always keep at least 2 people on my friends list that I really don't agree with their opinions. Just
Same.
so that
I keep quite a few actually to keep it balanced. Yeah.
I found more than 2 depressing. That was my issue. The other thing I do is I quite like, there's some games out there for spotting fake news. So training yourself in it, which occasionally there's some good gamification around that. And one of the techniques I use is spotting the bias, because actually you can listen to a news source, for instance, once you know the bias it's coming from and take that into account. So games around that. So there you go, 2 little approaches.
Cool. So we've got a couple of questions.
Okay, cool.
Simon, do you want to ask your question?
One moment.
Hi, Simon. You managed to mute yourself as you turn the video on, just say.
Right, that's better. Okay, sorry. So a long time ago, I found myself saying, thinking about gamification, thinking, game not lest ye be gamed. I mean, the whole thing where a lot of gaming has always been, within organisations or others, people have found ways of getting around that. And but particularly within organisations, that it concerns me that if a director says, yes, we want to optimize for this, when perhaps, I don't even know what the right words, if in some other kind of dimension, what is really needed is a sort of a slight angle to that. How do we kind of get those things right?
I mean, that's interesting. I would say I normally get this question as more around being careful what you measure. Yeah, so with gamification, you quite often have to measure something so you can feed back to people. And if you're measuring slightly the wrong thing, then you'll get slightly the wrong behavior, which I think is what that slight difference can be quite important. So I think it's always a good idea to build in a few checks and balances. And I mostly use the social/teams aspect for that, because if they police each other and you've given them clear vision on what it's going for, then people will keep each other on track, which we've seen done well. So there it's about really making sure everyone knows the purpose, the why of playing. The other thing we do is it's only a game if people volunteer to play it. So you've got to make it enticing and useful enough that they want to play and not force them to. There are a few too many examples of organizations forcing their staff to play gamification, which doesn't necessarily lead to the right results that way. But I've seen some great examples, one with Santander Bank in Poland, I think it was Poland, where they gamified all their counter staff, like 1,400 people. They were expecting maybe a voluntary uptake of about 60%, but word spread. And actually by the end of the year, 97% of the staff were playing it and enjoying it. And the average age of them was like mid-50s, 88% female counter staff, enjoying playing a sort of sim-style builder, which they got to play for 10 minutes each day, or 15 minutes if they hit their sales targets, and building villages collaboratively, so branch competing against branch, but all with the right end goal, and not being forced to play. So that kind of helps. So making sure it's voluntary, a few checks and balances using the people who are playing. And of course, you've got to keep an eye on. There's always, leaderboards are quite useful sometimes just for spotting people who are cheating.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, that's been a classic thing, I think, in organizations, that people would find ways to get themselves to the top of the leaderboard. Yeah.
Also, sometimes you've got to watch out for different cultures. So there was a game played in a big corporate in this country, in the UK, and there was a prize of like an iPad or something. and it was around how you communicate. So it was increasing communication between different members of the teams, and it worked well here. Then they launched it in their India part, and then the Indians were like really keen to get the iPad, so they created workflows, automated stuff, and crashed the email server for 28 hours, something like that, because they were just getting the points from these communications. A slightly different cultural approach breaks the game. There's some good stuff on there about that sort of thing.
So it's a case of not necessarily assuming people are going to handle it the way you think they are.
Yeah, because even if it worked in one country, it doesn't necessarily translate. And I've even seen it different regions of a country as well. So sometimes it's slightly different terminology, or even a different demographic. Like you've got poorer regions of a country who will behave differently because they're motivated differently. Yeah, I mean, right now in the UK, it'd be really interesting to run some experiments about how people would behave in a game if they're in lockdown or they're able to move about. Yeah, because they will have different things going on, and they will appreciate one set of wording or not around the challenge, for instance.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Good question, Simon. Thanks.
I just want to shout out Roxana, who has a question, but also is somewhere in the world where she woke up at 4 a.m. for this. That is dedication.
That is dedication. Well done. 100 bonus points.
Yeah. Roxana, do you want to ask a question?
Sure. There may be some snoring in the background, but
That's
it's
fine.
5:45 here now. So I was wondering, I really love your idea with the stages, and my team and I are working on something slightly different on the journey of the player versus the journey in the app and alignment between the two. But I was wondering how you incorporate the psychology of habit formation into the stages.
So we tend to think of engagement loops for the habit building thing. So you would want, I quite like how Whereback does this. So you have one sort of massive story arc. I would think of it as like a big quest, you know, like I'm going to eradicate all litter in the world, for instance, to refer back to the other example, and then build up small loops to get you towards that. So an activity might be to go and look for litter, and then another activity might be to pick some up. And each time you do one of these habit loops, you need to do some feedback about them doing it successfully or not. And that feedback should be designed in a way that encourages them to do it again. So these mini loops that then contribute to the overall goal within the player journey. So it's a good question, but we're going a bit deeper into the game design, but it's the habit building bit is important. I mean, and this is where books like Nir Eyal's book on habit building is really good. And to answer Ushi's question earlier about Facebook, for instance, Nir Eyal's latest book, Indistractable, is a really good way of proofing yourself against gamification. So I recommend that as a read. Also, you could kind of work backwards from what he says in there to work out how to gamify as well. Top read.
Because essentially we are habit forming creatures. We all have an addictive tendency, whether that's work, drugs, alcohol, shopping,
procrastination.
It's it is natural to us, isn't it? It's
I
just take much encouragement to form
I just find that a bit tricky when it's the other way around, when you're trying to get rid, so you're working against the bad habit and trying to replace that with a good one, because that addiction to the habit is kind of what makes the new one a lot harder. But I love the idea of tiny habits and looping. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, what you just said there, games are actually one of the best ways for replacing habits. What they've shown is when you're playing a good game, brain neuroplasticity increases, so you can potentially override a bad habit faster. So that's one of the reasons it's being used a lot in health. So there was one experiment, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but people who were playing it, an hour and a half of a very intensive, well-designed game, were able to overlay and replace the bad habit they had in an hour and a half, instead of, what do they say normally? The average is like 60 days of a new habit before it becomes
it's 66.
Yeah, so increasing the neuroplasticity, when we're in a state of play, we have that ability to create new connections and override old ones much more easily, which is one of the reasons it's really powerful. But I think for what you're asking, it sounds like a great example. Can you tell us a bit more about what habit you're trying to replace?
I wasn't thinking of a habit in particular, just from a application/theory bridging the two. But that makes perfect sense. And shame on me because I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, so I should have figured that out.
That's fine. It's a practical use of your knowledge. There you go. Thanks.
Dan has a question. Hello, Dan. Yeah, Dan.
Muted.
Okay, so he is asking, what is the most emotive project you have worked on?
That's a tricky one, isn't it? For me, it's generally whatever I'm working on at the time. So that's I think one of the first projects I worked on was a local organization. It's renamed now, but it was called My Max Me then. And they had two elements that we were gamifying, which was weight loss and also quitting smoking. And I think the emotions people experience as they personally get better is very satisfying. And some of the stuff we were doing was quite interesting. So one of the things you can do with an avatar, for instance, is you could upload a picture of yourself and then use a bit of software to auto squeeze it for weight loss. So make it look like 20% smaller or thinner. And that seemed to make just that one thing, visualizing success already, seemed to increase effectiveness by, if I remember correctly, 17% on the overall weight loss plan. Yeah, just by visualizing it. This is one of the reasons avatars are really good in games. Is quite often we can use them to visualize success, try things out. And once we've visualized it, it's a bit more real and we're more likely to do it. So I didn't do the neuroscience bit, but with dopamine, you get dopamine released when you set goals for yourself in anticipation of achieving that goal. And one of the things we do in gamification is we set lots of challenges to trigger dopamine, but it really works for goal setting, and games create lots of goals. So when we write down a goal, it's more likely to happen because we can visualize it more. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of happening in shopping a bit as well, which relates to some other events. An event we've got this afternoon that kind of AR within online shopping spaces where you can see things in your room or virtually try on clothes and things. It's really a direction of travel, isn't it?
I would say so. Yeah. And also, at the same time as trying it on, hey, what would it look like if you lost a bit of weight, gained a bit of weight? Try some stuff out. Yeah. Might inspire you.
Sarah's got a good point about CrossFit and Les Mills, which I don't know what that is, but Sarah, do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, so the Les Mills classes are like the usual ones that you see at kind of leisure centres. They're the body pump, body whatever, I can't remember the names of all of them. And they do change the kind of the routines, I think maybe like every month or so. So you'll do the same kind of class for 4 weeks, and then the next month it'll be a different song and a slightly different routine. But overall, really, it's kind of just up to you what weights you're using, and then it's quite consistent. Whereas CrossFit, which I have only barely dabbled with, I haven't quite joined the cult of CrossFit, but it seems to be a lot more structured around kind of achieving different milestones and working up to different milestones. So it feels a little bit more like there's a kind of a pyramid of achievement, and you can see people who are the absolutely insanely ripped, super fit athletes. You've got the CrossFit Games at the very, very top for the truly elite. So even the people in the local CrossFit boxes are part of kind of this entire culture, and the aspiration is to, I guess, get to the CrossFit Games and the elite at the very top.
Yeah, I think you've just described good gamification. I mean, the fact that you called it the cult of CrossFit, which is what people tend to call it as well.
Yeah, I've got a friend in it.
Quite well. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's being part of that game, just putting them together.
Yeah, the language I think is quite an interesting side, because there's so much terminology that's really unique to CrossFit, like the fact that they call it the box where they work out, and it's not a gym, it's literally the warehouse with some stuff on the walls. There's quite a kind of, I guess, part of that group identity with it.
Absolutely. And they built, I mean, a game is always like generally it's a space that's delineated, and then when you're inside it, you take part in the game. And so they've just made that really obvious. Yeah, I mean, a similar example that's been going a long time would be a boxing ring. Yeah, things happen in the boxing ring, and then people associate with boxing. So it's the same with CrossFit. It's a much better idea in terms of identity within the game, and this is what you see in games as well. People who play the same game, if they find out that the other person plays the same game, that's an instant bonding experience, and off they go and chat about all the things they do and the tips and tricks and all the rest of it. They're part of a community at that point. Cult, I always think if the word cult crops up, maybe they're doing a bit too much, but that's another story.
It's quite intense.
That's well spotted. A good. I didn't know the name Les Mills for the other exercises, but that's good.
Are there any more questions? Does anybody want to pick up on any points that we've covered so far?
I should probably stop sharing my screen so you can put your slides back up, shouldn't I? There we go.
Yes.
That's good. I'm so impressed someone got up at 4 a.m. as well. Well done for that.
I know, right? Can you see a driver's screen, Pete?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm sharing the wrong screen. Does anybody else have anything before we wrap up? Just pop it in the chat. Otherwise, I just wanted to draw your attention to some upcoming events. This afternoon, we have at 3:30, we have changes in online shopping behaviour due to COVID-19 and its impact on AI. The speaker for that is Dr. Fahana Leza from Essex University Business and Data Research Centre. Tomorrow morning, we have how has Brighton collected, used and made decisions about visitor data in 2020. Obviously, it's been an incredibly challenging year for tourism and footfall generally in towns. Gavin Stewart is the speaker on that. And tomorrow afternoon, we have citywide safety through crowdsourced data. And the speaker for that is Gillian Kowalchuk, who made an app crowdsourcing safety spots so that people could report where they felt safe or unsafe while walking around cities and towns.
Sounds like litter idea.
Yes, yeah, definitely. So if you haven't already, you can sign up for those via driva.com. There are also other events if you visit techcircus.io/future_events. Geodata Economies on the 12th of October, Internet of Place Datathon, and 5G Internet of Things and Smart Cities. Yeah, looks like some pretty interesting stuff coming up there. Visit that site. And you can still apply for the superfused data up until the end of this month. Just wanted to really thank Pete. That was an amazing presentation, really interesting and very engaging.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you haven't already, please register on driva.com. You'll have access to resources and research and videos from previous of these events. Yeah, I think that's all. We'll wrap it up for today. Thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you for having me. And if anyone wants to reach out and connect to me and ask a question, that's absolutely fine. I look forward to hearing from you.